This presentation has been a long time coming. As folks are probably aware, the RDA has been engaged in what we had been calling the Downtown River Corridor Plan since the early part of this year. In January, we sent out a request for proposal and had 8 different firms submit, which showed a lot of interest in this opportunity here in the city of Watertown. And Rinka, along with Kapoor, were the firms selected to engage in this project. We have with us Eric Main from Rinka, who will be going through a presentation on the current draft of the plan, and this will be an opportunity for our plan commission members to give feedback. I wanted to know, we do have a few members of the public in attendance. It's great to see that there's so much interest in this. We did invite all of the members of the Common Council to attend, and then we do also have some folks viewing online. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Main from Rinka.
Eric, before you get started, I just want to kind of level set with the team. So we're just looking for feedback from you all as plan commissioners, and then that could potentially refine the presentation. And then our next step after that is really going to not probably happen until next year.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Next step will likely be that we will, once we have the finalized plan, we will publish it. It'll be available on the RDA's website. And then probably in first quarter of 25 at Public Works, when they really start looking at some of the long-term capital spending programs and plans, at that time, we would bring it to Public Works for them to review.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mason. Thank you, members of the Plan Commission. So I believe I'm sharing the document now on the Zoom meeting. The first, I think, point of notice is, and to start to build that excitement, is we've started to call the River Corridor study something slightly different. So it's now referred to as the City of Watertown Rock River District Vision. So the idea behind the naming, which was one of the processes we worked with the RDA and some community members, some stakeholders on, was to start to rebrand and start to talk about the vision behind this area of Watertown in a slightly different way. So this is a working title, and we'd like your feedback on that as well. But the idea is to start to build that excitement and really to put a stake in the ground in terms of owning a piece of the Rock River as part of Watertown. So every good report needs a purpose behind it. So the intent of this report is to really seek approval to become a development framework for the future of the downtown area in Watertown. Allow for the allocation of public-private funding and financing as identified by the public. So a good framework for smart investment. And then to act as a guidebook for developers to really provide the highest and best value for the city of Watertown. So those are our 3 main objectives behind this report. The Rock River District Study Area is outlined in a white dotted line, so you can see the extent of this report, and we'll get into the detail in the following slides. So one of our first steps was to really understand and analyze the study area. We did this topographically from 10,000 feet and looked at all of the various different existing considerations in this study area. Everything from the river edge condition of the Rock River, the various different types of river edge condition, to the different development parcels that the RDA had identified as catalytic sites or in need of reinvestment and higher, better use, to street circulation, pedestrian circulation, and some of the great amenities, community amenities that are part of this study area. So understanding all of those started to get us in the right mindset about what the appropriate framework for future development was. In addition to understanding the place, the existing conditions in the place, the RDA put together a very smart guiding statement for us, and I'll just read that before as we launch into starting to talk about the plan. So we're painting a picture the community can see to create buy-in that offers developers and business owners a chance to be part of the further revitalization of downtown. Economic development is not just about a few buildings, or jobs. It's about developing placemaking, housing, childcare, education, engagement, and community. So I think it's a very profound statement that we, it really put us in the right mindset as we continue to really analyze the study area. We are not the first firm or individuals to think about downtown Watertown. There's been many studies in the past, and we're continuing to build off of the great intellect, the great planning that has come before us, and the vision for what could be for Watertown. Mason mentioned the RFP that was sent out to firms, and we've highlighted some of the aspects of the RFP that were important for this plan to address. But it was also important to recognize a lot of the previous work that had been done. And it's all culminated in a recently approved comprehensive plan for Watertown. So a lot of these ideas build off of the planning work that has already been implemented for the city. As we started out, we wanted a very clear vision statement specifically for the Rock River District. And I'll read that statement as well. We worked with the RDA as well as the community through a couple of community engagement exercises, and we collectively created this statement. So the Rock River District vision aims to strategically position the Watertown community for sustained investment in revitalization. Leveraging its unique identity and existing public amenities, our goal is to catalyze growth and to cultivate a dynamic, community-oriented future. So the word community is a reoccurring word, and you'll see that through all of this presentation material. And it's really important that we not only engage the community, but do right by the community in the way that we think about the framework to support the community in the future. So that being said, one of our first community engagement activities, an open house, we started with just a high level engagement on what was the right vision for their community. And one of the interesting things that we heard, the first question we asked was, it was about the river itself. So before any investment was made in its current state, the Rock River running through Watertown, do you consider that an amenity to the city? And at that time, there was a kind of a lukewarm response. Only half of the people in that meeting said, in that meeting and online, said that the Rock River was an actual amenity to the city of Watertown. And by the time we had gone through a visioning process, thinking through some of the statements that you see on the screen and some of the different potential uses for the downtown, this river corridor plan, and also talking about some of the investment along the river, the needle moved dramatically. By the end of that first engagement session, we asked the same question again, and with some investment in the community, would the river be seen as an amenity? And 4.9 out of 5 people said it would be. So it's interesting that even the perception, I think this report begins to address the perception about the river being an amenity, the Rock River. So the main work that we did together in our open house engagements was to create a series of planning principles. And here are the 8 planning principles in front of you. I won't go into each one of these in detail, but we worked with the RDA on these, all of the previous planning studies that we digested, our existing analysis of your city and the flows and movements of pedestrians and vehicles throughout the city, gave us these 8 planning principles. We worked with the community to not only understand and educate everyone on what the previous reports had been recommending, but we also asked the individuals who attended these engagement sessions to help us prioritize these planning principles. And the reason we asked for these to be prioritized is if these are, whatever order these are prioritized in, will guide a different framework or a different plan for the downtown area. The community came out in support, first and foremost, of an amenity-rich public realm. So thinking about the existing amenities and how we could bring further amenities to the downtown was a key priority, and you'll see that show up in in the framework and in our recommendations. The other two that tied for close second were walkability, and then to kind of double down on the Watertown character and uniqueness. What's unique about Watertown? How do we amplify that? How do we improve or continue to build upon the great uniqueness of the city of Watertown? And then encouraging redevelopment, safe streets, downtown housing options, and environmental concerns rounded out the rest of the planning principles. And you'll see as we work through the rest of the slides, or the remainder of the slides, you'll see a column along the right-hand side that shows how these planning principles were applied. So you'll see the real application of the community's prioritization of these guiding principles. So you see them along the right-hand side there, those icons for each one of the principles. So as we began to think about a new framework for the potential future of the Rock River corridor, it was really apparent that a continuous river walk would be a destinational experience that would connect a lot of the great amenities that already exist in the community today. So building upon what's unique about Watertown, Fannie Mae Park, obviously the Benson Family Square, these are great amenities that are existing today in your community, along with some other great pocket parks and opportunities on both sides of the Rock River. These, in some ways, are islands today that are only accessed by Water Street and First Street and are unconnected to one another. So thinking about connectivity brings in that vibrancy and the sort of safety aspect. If these are visually connected and physically connected with a continuous river walk along the Rock River, they become much different amenities, and the perception of those amenities is much different as well. So that was the concept that we began to engage folks around and to build excitement around, and we received a very positive response. So how do we create that connected Riverwalk experience? Today there are some stretches of the Riverwalk, but there are some clear and obvious challenges to make that connected Riverwalk. So we've identified we're calling them key Riverwalk projects. And the reason we call them keys is they sort of unlock that continuous Riverwalk. I mean, there are, so we'll get into each one of these in a little bit of detail to understand each one of them. So starting on the far north, the pedestrian bridge north, we're calling that. This potential infrastructure improvement is a pedestrian bridge that really it sits on an existing right of way that connects a street on the east side of the plan to a street on the west side of the plan that currently dead end at the lake. At the river. And those streets, I believe it's, can you help me with this? Rock Street and Division Street. Those two streets would also connect the continuous Riverwalk to Fannie Mae Park, so that it becomes an extension of this great investment to one of the key parks in the study area. Another one of the key Riverwalk projects is we're calling it the Katy Street Connection. This piece of Riverwalk extension walks along the side of the river, connecting Katy Street back to one of the other development parcels that are under control of the city at the time of this report. Another key Riverwalk project is directly adjacent or across the river from Benson Family Square. This is the Main Street connection, and you'll see this Riverwalk section connecting along to the senior center along the sort of east side of the river. And then finally finishing on Pedestrian Bridge South. This connects the Parks and Rec Center directly across the river just south of the dam to another municipally owned parcel on the other side of the river. So those four key Riverwalk projects really we think will go a long way to create a destinational Riverwalk experience for Watertown. A connected experience that not only would local residents and the community that we've engaged in conversations with, not only would they utilize that to improve their health and wellness and connectivity to other amenities, but people from outside of Watertown would begin to create it as a destinational experience and bring vibrancy to the downtown area. That's the hope. Some of the other study aspects to this plan starts to look at the river edge conditions. So we have a range of different existing river edge conditions, and then this diagram proposes some improvements to those river edge conditions. We have really 4 different conditions that are included in the report on how to sort of improve that consistent experience and natural edge condition along both sides of the Rock River. In addition to considering the river edge condition, we also recognize the need for some stormwater infrastructure, some green infrastructure. As many of you may be aware, currently the city of Watertown is shedding quite a bit of water directly into the Rock River. So to improve the water quality of the Rock River, and for some of the grant funding opportunities that you'll hear about later in this presentation, starting to think about a stormwater green infrastructure zone on both sides of the river, so you can manage, hold stormwater and treat it before it flows back to the river, is something that you can achieve some grant funding for, and is also will improve the quality of the water, obviously going back into the Rock River. So with a continuous Riverwalk, it starts to bring some other opportunities to the table. This diagram shows some key entry points to the Riverwalk. If you create a great Riverwalk experience, it can only be as good as the front door leading to it, right? Because you have to get to the Riverwalk experience. So this starts to ask the question about where those key entry points are. So we've identified those and thought about the potential future improvements around the entry points. And then taking another step back from the entries to the Riverwalk experience, there's also a signage and wayfinding program to identify where those entry points to the Riverwalk occur. That signage opportunity connects back to both First and Water Street as being the front doors to the Riverwalk. So the idea here is for that destinational Riverwalk experience, it really starts on First Street and Water Street. So if you're arriving as by car, or if you're arriving as by a pedestrian, as a local resident, your first interaction or your first front door experience is along Water Street and First Street. And we are proposing, as part of this plan, some improvements to those 2 streets to improve the front door, the look and feel of the downtown area. That includes some landscaping, some of that green infrastructure, some pedestrian improvements, some crosswalks, for example, and some better street parking amenities. Speaking of parking, we also took a high level view of the parking impact of this plan. So we've identified those 7 catalytic sites that we'll look at here shortly. But this was a high level parking takeoff that we did. And zones 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the zones of this. This study was done in 2022. This parking analysis study, we're affecting zones 3, 4, 5, and 6 in this proposal or in this study, and impacts essentially 132 parking stalls. So there was a deficit of 132 parking stalls. That 2022 parking study that we analyzed or looked through talked about a 53% occupancy during peak hours. This is in the current study. And there is approximately 590 surplus parking stalls. So we have a deficit of 132. the current, there's current 590 surplus. And if all of the remainder of the catalytic sites, the 7 other sites, were developed the way that this plan suggests as the highest and best use, we'd be providing 390 additional parking stalls as well. And some of those could obviously be used as cross-utilized for the public. So at a very high level, we did look at parking, the impact on existing parking, and the potential new parking that we're bringing to the plan. This is a moving target and will continue to evolve as developers come to the community and begin to build out aspects of the plan. But just know that we're beginning to track this as part of our recommendations, as part of this study and toolkit. So that arrives, all of that analysis arrives at the Rock River District site plan. So here you see the fully formed site plan with all the improvements shown at a very high level. And these all align with the planning principles that were clearly articulated from the community and from all of the previous planning documentation that we were able to study as we prepared this proposal. And with that destinational Riverwalk experience, one of the intents of this study is to really allow these 8 catalytic sites to be sort of supercharged by this report, so that there would be even more developer interest to come and consider the developing some of these catalytic sites. Now, all 8 of these sites are in our report, and we developed a highest and best use study of each one of these in our report. And right after this presentation, when we hear feedback, we'll issue that report, and you'll be able to look at the design work around each one of these sites. We did want to show you what one of those tear sheets or cut sheets look like for one of the potential sites. And again, this study is to look at, it's a highest and best use study. It's not the only potential use. We're still remaining very open-minded and flexible about the uses of this downtown area and these catalytic sites. But this one represents something that aligns with the planning framework, the comprehensive plan, the mixed use downtown desire from the comprehensive plan. So this example shows one of the sites that is essentially, it's the culmination of 3 sites and a right-of-way vacation, as well as you can see the area highlighted as letter A. And this is one of those areas where we would start to recommend that you either parcel out that portion of the site for the Riverwalk, or it's a public-private joint venture opportunity to create that Riverwalk as part of the development plan. And then a description of the potential development opportunities, considerations, and even some of the grant opportunities that apply to each one of these catalytic sites. So this is an example of one of those, but we have all 8 included in the report for your consideration. So there's all 8 of the potential site uses. And with that, I'd like to hand the conversation over to Jeff Stone from Kapoor to talk about some of the grant funding opportunities connected to both the Riverwalk and some of these catalytic site opportunities. Jeff.
Thank you, Eric. So as was mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about funding potentials, particularly with grants that would help with the implementation of this plan. There's a number of resources that might be pursued. One that's, as you look down the list here on the slide, it talks about community-wide assessment grant. That's a grant that has been that's through the US EPA that can be used to assess the overall kind of environmental conditions of a community-wide area like this. So that's one that could be pursued. That one right now doesn't have a specific date for the application of that. That program just concluded its most recent application process, and when that date becomes available, we can make sure that that's available to staff here. In addition, there's a number of programs through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation that could be used for elements of the program, the brownfield site assessment of specific sites. There's historic preservation tax credits, which might be applicable to some of the sites that are involved in the report. The idle sites redevelopment program may also be applicable. So there's a number of programs that could be accessed through Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Additionally, the Transportation Assistance, or excuse me, Alternatives Program with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and its Safe Routes to School program would also be another source of funding. There also are a number of programs through the Wisconsin DNR that would allow for the acquisition of right-of-way that could be used for walkways and trails in the area. So those could be very early on in the process pursued in order to help gather the right-of-way that would be necessary for the construction of a river walk of the type that is within the report. Another grant program is the Community Development Investment Grant Program, also from Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, which has been used to do catalytic projects in communities like this that spur other economic development or drive economic development in the community. So there's a number of areas that could funding could be pursued through grants. In addition, I know that you have some experience with philanthropic community being another resource. And finally, those public-private partnerships with developers that would be interested in the area and would be interested in working on the development both of the catalytic sites and also the key Riverwalk developments. All of those could be used. As we looked at this and looked at other communities that have done similar types of projects, one of the lessons I think that's valuable is to know that having a plan in place and being ready to move forward is really key to accessing grant funding. We saw a particular illustration in West Bend of a community that was ready with a plan, and obviously over the last several years we had a lot of funding at the federal level and state level that wasn't available before, and they were able to act quickly because they had a plan created and in place and were ready to move. So one of the things I think about implementing is to be prepared to take advantage of grant opportunities when they come up. The other thing I would say about grant opportunities is we're in a rather fluid environment. A lot of grants had come from the federal government in the last few years that were never available to local governments directly. That's one thing that you want to be aware of. When we look at the list of Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation grants, many of those have been changed and developed in the last couple of years. So having a plan and then being able to respond to the grant environment that we have will be key, I think, towards taking advantage of dollars that are available both at from the state and the federal level. I think those are the main points on this slide. We'll move on and just give a brief overview of the next steps for implementation as far as civil engineering. It was mentioned earlier that there's different treatments for the river edge as this development is carried out. So every time there's an area that's going to be developed, there'll be a preliminary plans would need to be prepared. And then there'd be a pre-application meeting with the Wisconsin DNR. There'd be a study of the impact of any impact to the river and the water in that area, how it's carried, what that would do to the hydrology of the area. So the steps for those meetings have all been laid out so that there's a plan in place as you have either development of one of the key Riverwalk elements or of a catalytic site, that those steps can be followed through and acted on quickly. And this is a developed plan that would lead to the permits that are necessary to accomplish the plan.
Thanks, Jeff. So I think that culminates, or that ties together all of the key aspects of this plan. You know, the plan is really a framework for a potential future. And, you know, we have built in a lot of flexibility, especially around the catalytic sites. This is to show a potential future and a really high and best use of a lot of those development parcels. So let's talk about some potential next steps that this report can achieve. So we started out this conversation by giving a purpose behind the report, and that all remains the same. But what are some of the immediate next steps? So these are all, I guess the formal presentation is done on the report. This is more of these are some potential opportunities or next steps. So adopting the Rock River District vision. So currently this report is a simple standalone document or recommendation from the RDA. That could be sort of codified, or some weight could be added to that document if it was created as an addendum to the comprehensive plan. So that would be one opportunity. Another thing that this document recommends some things that aren't in perfect alignment with the zoning code in Watertown. So there are a couple of areas that would need some kind of adjustment. There's several different mechanisms to do that. One of them would be to create a new mixed-use zoning district. That's kind of what the comprehensive plan recommends, is a mixed-use downtown district. That would be one approach. Another approach would be to rezone. There's eight parcels as part of this study. Rezone a couple of those that aren't in perfect alignment with the zoning code to uses that would be permitted. And then the final one is kind of the way that development occurs today in Watertown, which is a PUD zoning overlay to create a development that falls within that kind of higher and best use density and use in the downtown area. And again, if this document is meant to make it even easier or encourage development, you know, there may be some strategic next steps that help that occur. Some other next steps are to have some of these infrastructure projects priced, so you have an idea of the valuation of the continuous Riverwalk destinational experience. And so you can figure out what some other capital expenditure or those public-private financing partnerships might look like. Identifying some phasing that aligns with your community priorities. And we would be happy to assist with any of these steps, as well as continuing to build that story. So we've come up with a great name collectively with the steering committee, the Rock River District Vision, that could also turn into some brand identity and even a standalone website, for example, that could build even more momentum around the continuous Riverwalk experience. And then just general facilitation of those developer conversations that even many have occurred while we've been developing this report over the last few months, and they'll hopefully continue to occur. So those are some next steps. Thank you.
Question time
Yes.
or comments? Yes, sir.
Several. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. It's been in depth. Obviously, a lot of time, energy, and work has been put into this. So I guess I'll start at the beginning. You mentioned the name. I like the name, except I think it's a little too long. And this is just personal preference. City Watertown, fine. But that next line should be 3 words, not 4. Either River District Vision or Rock River District or Rock River Vision. To me, shortening it, because people are going to drop a word off of there, whether you want them to or not. They're going to make it as short as they can. Just seems like 4 words doesn't flow as well. Personal preference, you know, Like I
No,
said,
You're not, I'm smiling because to this day, I still can't remember the old name for this project. I would just say to Mason, you know that project you're working on?
Downtown River Corridor Opportunity Analysis and Strategic Development Plan.
Yeah,
this is better than that.
Yeah. so I just feel like, the downtown,
Shorter,
I think I called it the downtown plan.
shorter is better. That's just kind of where I'm going with that, but no, I like it. I just think that if you drop one word, I think it's a little more concise. A lot of the questions that came up in my mind, you answered sort of as we were going. One of them you touched on, but I don't think it was really deeply spoken about, and that's it being a navigable waterway. You mentioned having to bring in the Army Corps of Engineers and all that. Are there any concerns or obstacles that we might run into with that? I mean, we're talking about
I'm
building
gonna go
several
ahead and
pedestrian
answer that
bridges.
Yes, is the answer. Right? I mean, that's the short answer and please come up as well. But I mean, any time Mr. Krieger has to hop off just for the purposes of your minutes. Anytime we're doing anything in the Rock River, I think we've learned
Yeah, anytime you impact.
it's an uphill
the-
battle.
The water and the Corps of Engineers is a part of those meetings that would be occurring with DNR. All the other interested groups would be involved in developing that. We'd have to look at the high and low watermark, what the clearance is on the bridges that would be created, the pedestrian bridges, those types of things would all be a part of that discussion going forward.
If
So
I-
I knew the answer was yes. Let me ask it a slightly
Sure.
different way. Are there any fears that there could be any deal breakers because of that engineering? Like,
We've.
has there
we've
been
spent
any
quite a-
preliminary engineering on it?
Yeah,
that-
we've spent a bit of time trying to shake out any of those deal breakers.
Okay.
We're relatively confident, but the DNR has not engaged in a deep level to actually, go through some of the assumptions that we've made as a design team. So I think that's one of the next steps, in the new year is to engage the DNR and sort of look at some of those details.
Can I jump off of that? Just because I just, a question in line with that. So I can be a little critical sometimes of state agencies and how they operate with local units of government. And I say that as a person who worked in a state agency and I myself did not care enough about the local units of government. I mean, major driver cities, yes, but communities our size, no. And so my thought was, kind of coming out of the pandemic, the Community Health Foundation and us and some partners, we approached the Department of Children and Families and we said, hey, we're thinking about trying this new pilot for childcare. So we went to them first and said, we're thinking about this. What are your thoughts? And it took a few meetings for them to be like, yeah, I think you guys should run with that idea. And we did, and it's been successful. So I was wondering, is there any value in having a similar kind of introductory conversation with the DNR to say, hey, we are adopting this Rock River District vision. This is what our planners are telling us. Like, throw at us your concerns, tell us what are,
They definitely are open to those types of meetings and discussions in advance. I know that that's one of the things they talk about, like with the whether it's trail planning or, walkway planning, those types of things. They encourage those discussions with particularly some of the regional folks, or there's area of interest specialists at DNR in some of these grant areas, like the stewardship programs and the federally funded programs. So you can have those conversations up front and I believe get some good feedback and insight into the challenges and the opportunities.
If I could offer one other thing on that from the RDA perspective, we do talk fairly regularly with Tom Coogan, who's kind of our contact at the Wisconsin DNR. He has been sent a copy of the draft of this plan and so far hasn't thrown up any red flags. And frankly, I think they've been fairly engaged, just being aware that we're in this planning process. And I think they're actually kind of excited about the things we're
Tom
talking about
has
here.
always been wonderful to work with. It's just when you get into our people, I'm looking at the engineer in the room, that then things start to get hairy about floodplains and H&H studies. I mean, the town square was thrown off by 6 months because of a study that the DNR required in the 11th hour. Now, I'm not saying it was their 11th hour, it was our 11th hour, and it was just an not awareness that we needed to have an additional level of water monitoring during that development. So
And we have engaged the DNR and started those preliminary conversations. And I think one of the aspects that you won't get full engagement until you really start in jest with a project. That's when you get the deeper engagement. But we have talked about the concept that you see and the draft framework with the DNR.
back to you.
Thank you. So my next one is something that is just kind of confusing to me because I don't understand it, I guess. I'm not sure how you can have a deficit of 132 parking stalls and a surplus of 590 parking stalls at the same time. As far as I know, you can't have a deficit and a surplus of something at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that. Could you please explain that further?
I should clarify. So the 4 sites, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the total aggregate parking stalls on those 4 sites is 132 stalls. So those would be removed from the overall count. The parking study showed 590 surplus stalls. So you could simply subtract the 132 from the 590 and call it a overall surplus, but I think there's a little bit of nuance in there because the 590 surplus also includes some of the stalls that are on site 3, 4, 5, and 6. Does that help answer that question?
It does. So the deficit is actually referring to a removal of
Yes,
132
exactly.
parking stalls. So it's just the terminology is what made it confusing
Yeah.
to me, because
I'll
using
you'll correct
deficit
that.
surplus referring to the same item is kind of what didn't work for my brain.
Yeah, we'll add some clarity there.
And the last one is, I noticed the catalytic sites. We've discussed a couple of those here recently in the plan commission. And what I'm seeing in this presentation versus what, like Mr. Schrader, who was just in front of us, spoke about, it doesn't seem like they're jiving. Like the hotel idea, I think he said that was one where multifamily apartment was definitely on the radar, but the hotel probably wasn't. So and I know that this is very preliminary at this stage, but just wondering what connections have been made with the developers, property owners already to work towards getting these catalytic sites to where we want them to be.
I guess that's more of a me question. No, that's very fair. As far as the property, I think you're referring to the former Johnsonville site that David Schrader's group is engaged with. They have ownership of. We had talked preliminarily about, multifamily or hotel. I definitely agree with you that multifamily seems to be kind of the realistic track on that one at this point. We have developers currently considering 4 different parcels that this study identified as catalytic sites for development. And as far as any of the privately owned ones that were identified, all of the property owners have been talked to. They were all okay with this information being in there. A certain one was highly skeptical that this plan would come to fruition ever, but they were still fine with their site being identified as being available for redevelopment. So, yeah.
Would you flip to that slide, please? I want to just make sure I read it right. It said hotel. It was one of your examples.
Yeah, you can see under potential uses,
Where am
the
I?
hotel is not the only use, right?
Yeah.
So as long as we keep, this is just one of the highest and best use study opportunities for the site, but there are a range of different uses.
And I wanted to call back to that one because I was around during 2014 when we launched, or when Redevelopment Resources provided their plan. So was Melissa. Were you on sabbatical? And, and a hotel is what came and it's what stuck. And then we have spent the better part of a decade explaining to people that was a concept, right? A rendering, an idea, an example of a highest and best use. So I appreciate the listing of those potential uses, just knowing that even in my 11 years here, the market has shifted a few times for a hotel. It's gone up, it's crashed, it's gone back up, it's kind of restabilizing. So having it as a listed item, I think is really important. Just perhaps making sure that that timing is right is where we're at right now. And what we know right now is housing is, is what's taking the cake and it should. And so I think that's why you're seeing proposals like you guys have been seeing here at Plan Commission.
And don't get me wrong, that you've left it open for flexibility. And I understand why you're leaving it open for as much flexibility as possible, which is, I think, what we actually talked about on this commission as well, is we want to be flexible.
Yeah.
We want, I like the way you just put it, the highest and best use. That's what we want. So again, thank you. I appreciate all the work you put into this. I have no further questions.
Thank you, sir. Others? Yes.
Sure, I'd just like to add a couple of comments. I think this is a great starting point. I know all of these plans, from sitting here talking about it to actually seeing work occurring, is about 7 years, 10 years sometimes too. So it takes a really long time to get there. But just knowing, the condition of our present seawall situation downtown, it's not sustainable. And, really the downtown is really like the most precious thing we have in our community, and the river running through it is the ultimate complement. So seeing elements of this hopefully coming to life someday will be great for the city. Not all of it will come to pass, obviously, but you have to have a framework at a starting point from someplace. And I think this is a good start.
Thank you. Others?
I will say I second or third the title. It's just a little long for me, but it's much better than what you said before. Also, just high level, I love the idea of being able to grab a cup of coffee and walk and not have to drive somewhere to get it and then come all the way and park and then be able to walk again. So the idea of being able to be by the river, still, have commerce by the river, be able to walk to certain places, I think it's amazing. So thank you.
Honestly, get rid of the word rock. We all know what river's in town.
All right, I got a couple. Can you please flip to for the planning principles slide? This is just a statistical question. Are you comfortable with the spread that you saw here? I mean, I generally would like one more. Would you please go back the other way? The one with your really nice bar chart. There you go. Do you feel real solid about that? I mean, it's like, I want a couple to really jump off the page. I'm okay with this is normal for this line of work. You would know better than I would.
I mean, I think we started with a great list of planning principles, right? And those principles came from a lot of different sources. I tried to explain in the beginning, and they all apply to the framework. I think the ones that are prioritized show a lot about your community. I think it's a good reflection of what your community values. And I'm excited by, the community wanting an amenity-rich public realm. I think it's really aspirational. I mean, there are some aspects like the environmental concerns that aren't a top priority, which you can understand that as well. Right? If maybe once you have more amenities, then the environmental concerns can also be addressed. So I think this kind of shows where the community is at today. And I think,
Do you feel okay about it?
Yeah. I
Okay,
do.
great. I don't know, just I'm not surprised because I've been doing this for a minute. But I think it does really articulate, so often as local units of government, we don't feel like we're hitting the mark. And this is almost like a perfect visual of why, right? Like we as a city cannot make everyone happy at all times. And honestly, if we even hit a majority, I mean, we're hitting it out of the park. You see essentially, 5 things that are almost equally important. So I'm glad to hear your insight on that one. I have a few questions. The next item I had on my list though was just a tremendous pro that you've already heard from this group, like the connectedness of spaces. you know, I grew up here. I feel super confident walking all over the place and knowing which back alley to take to get to which place, not knowing if those are public alleys my whole life or private ones, but you know, I did it anyway. So to be able to have both visibly though and physically connected spaces, and that sank in with me. I think often we think of just the physical connectedness of spaces, but the visibility to know that I can look down and realize all of the places I can get by just being on one place. And then to have it be a safe place, and I don't mean safe, you know, criminally, I mean safe for maneuvering. Oh man, I was just reading something this morning, a report that someone gave to me. And it was really one of the first times I've seen, you know, accessibility listed consistently. Like, oh yeah, it was really accessible. And we're very, well, then we're starting to do something right. I mean, having the ability for someone to visibly see where they want to go and physically know they can get there by just seeing it is really inspiring to me.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because there's a lot of detail that we spared you in this overall view. You know, the Riverwalk is kind of there's the bank is high in some locations and low, and the Riverwalk is, you know, close to the water in some locations and not in others. And to create that accessible, continuous route, it's a challenge. And, you know, we have kind of a high level concept of how we can make that occur. I think that would be, you know, that's the dream, is to have a continually, you know, accessible
Right.
environment, which I think would be great.
Excuse me, on the pedestrian bridge south, I know I'll get asked, so I'm gonna ask you, why not just use the Milwaukee Street Bridge?
Again, it's about, you know, that continually connected experience. If you think about, I don't know how well you know that section of the Riverwalk, but there was a public-private partnership where
Yes.
the Riverwalk hugs a residential development. And that's one of the highest points of the Riverwalk right
Yeah.
there. You're not too far away from Water Street at that point, but to shift to Water Street and then over to the Milwaukee Street Bridge, across Milwaukee Street Bridge, and then back down to one of the lowest parts of the Riverwalk, that experience, you know, you become disconnected with the continuous Riverwalk experience. You're now a street dweller, and it's a different experience overall. And if, you know, of course, it still works at some level. But you know, if you're looking for that ideal destinational experience where people will really go out of their way to show up to Watertown to experience all the amenities around that continuous Riverwalk loop, that was the intent as a starting point.
It makes good sense. I would not have thought of that. Thank you.
I think if you built it and going on the street and around, when it was over, you'd be like, gosh, I really wish it was connected right here, right? It would be one of those afterthought things. So I really liked that explanation.
I think you spoke about Katy Street on a particular slide. My notes just said clarify Katy Street. Oh, it's the Katy Street connector. So you may know better, or I don't want to pin you on this one. I'm just saying, like,
So Kate,
are we going around the Hurdle property with the Katy Street connector? Are you cutting through that?
There are two parcels along Water Street that are independently owned parcels.
Yes.
The strategy
Oh, high pace.
is to
Okay.
sort of it's not bypass, but it's to connect Katy Street back to.
I understand. So if there was a willingness, because there have been conversations very preliminarily over the years with the owner of, I know for sure one of the parcels, the single family home. If there's a willingness from those parcel owners to have an easement across their property for compensation, I'm sure, then perhaps the Katy Street connector isn't necessary. Those would be serving the same purpose.
Definitely. I do want to highlight that, you know, there's an interesting condition that's sort of
Yes.
grandfathered in.
Yes.
It's that seawall that's part of the corner property on the Katy Street Bridge. We see that from a design perspective as a really cool amenity, as a cafe looking down the river, have the Riverwalk connect to that in some way. We think is a really,
Okay.
really cool opportunity, but it would be more cost effective for sure to keep that Riverwalk, on shore, on the bank.
Okay. I am not gonna painstakingly put everyone through the rest of my questions, but I have two just for the room. Could you please go to the slide on the seawall conditions? And then just really briefly touch on, because mine is not in color. Could you explain to us just what those different colors are? I am perhaps too aware of our seawall conditions.
Yeah.
Um,
So again, these are some recommendations. We know that there's going to be some in-depth conversations with the DNR on these,
Mhm.
but one of the things that maybe is part of the reason that the community, the perception of the river as not a strong amenity is maybe because the river edge condition is sort of piecemeal, right? There's
Yes.
no kind of consistent aesthetic across the river edge. So we sort of, and trying to think about the overall cost, right? If you just ran a continuous sort of precast or poured concrete seawall, it would be, extremely expensive. So trying to think about how do you have a consistent feel and experience while still thinking about, a cost-effective approach. So our approach for this study was everything south of the dam would be much more natural.
Okay,
So we have a stabilized natural edge, which also you can sort of spike that natural riprap edge with natural aquatic plants.
great. That's what we
That-
just did, right?
Is it?
We just
Yeah?
did that, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah, that's why I
Well-
was like, please tell me that's what that color means.
So-
I'm serious with that. I was hypothesizing brown meant natural, but I was like, so we have a plan like every other year, we're inspecting and then designing if needed and then improving the seawall conditions generally. Our public works director, Andrew, is leading that effort, but we've been primarily focused on the south side. And we have done some initial work with natural embankment stabilization and restoration. So few.
Great.
We didn't
So-
tell you that. That just means it's a really great design. Those
Good.
things, those
So
things
that's
align.
the light brown area, but then
Okay.
you will see there are a couple of black zones, and that is to accept the pedestrian bridge
Sure.
connection. So that pedestrian bridge will need a stabilized seawall condition. And then above the dam, we were thinking a really maybe a good approach would be similar to the Benson Family Square, either sheet pile or concrete edge
Okay.
seawall. Maybe an extension of the Benson Family Square sheet pile along that section of both sides of the river could be a really good approach. And then as you move further north, we start to get into scenarios like around the Masonic Building where we'll have a constructed Riverwalk. You see that as the third. These are little river edge sections, right? So each one of these little sections apply to these different color-coded zones. So the constructed Riverwalk would essentially have its own legs down to the riverbank, the floor of the river. And it would be a standalone construction. So we have some of those occurring as well, which you see highlighted. I think those are in blue. And then the continuous seawall as
Okay.
well. So
Okay. So that's a great opportunity for you to have awareness for work. And then we are actually, at least it's currently still in the budget. And the budget will get approved next month. An overhaul of our zoning code. So some of these zoning code changes that you mentioned on a slide are good awareness to perhaps wrap into that project. So I'll put a button on my comments just by saying that it's incredible to see a vision of what's possible and to have that be connected to work that our team already identified as necessary work to continue to move the city along. Just to see those two things dovetail quite naturally. I presume you didn't talk to either of these gentlemen about that. Just means we have our eye on the prize, right? Like we're all going the same direction, which is just such a great thing to hear and see. So this
And
is
this
phenomenal.
presentation, just excuse me,
Yeah.
this presentation is just a highlight. There's a lot of more detail in the.
I know,
actual report.
I took it on a trip with me.
Oh, great,
Read it,
good.
yeah.
Good.
It's a great report. This is a great way to get a high level overview. I don't want to skip anyone on my team. Any other comments or thoughts? There's enough people from the public here. Does anyone want to have anything they'd like to question or anyone remote? Yeah, as long as you come to the microphone. Thank you.
Turn on.
There you go.
Jennifer Baki, I live at 117 River Lawn. We were blessed in 1987 after I moved to Watertown in 1985 to get a river property. And the idea of a continuous river walk is right on target because that's certainly what Watertown has to offer, especially with the horseshoe shape. I mean, we walk from our property. Are we going on a 2-bridge walk or a 3-bridge walk or a 4-bridge walk or a 5-bridge walk? And I think I heard you at some point, Mayor McFarland, talk about, I maintain 11 bridges in this town.
A lot of bridges.
But I came today to be inspired about what is possible and where this city is going and might be going. As I am already retired, my husband's looking at retiring. And so I thank you for the vision. And I also don't know if this is appropriate, but yesterday I went out on Tivoli Island for the first time since the improvements, and that is incredible. I mean, I was attached to a few of those trees and have a lot of memories on taking the wee ones who are now 31 and 35 out there. But beautiful job well done when you talk about reinforcing the river. And the river is this community's greatest asset. So thanks,
Thank
just
you.
keep up the good work.
Thank you. All right. Any last comments? Otherwise, I'm going to ask Mason just a second, just to kind of wrap us up with our next steps.
Yeah, thank you for that and really appreciate everybody taking the time today. This went a little bit longer than we had originally planned, but I think it was great that we didn't have anything else on the agenda for the Plan Commission, so we could give this some extra time. And I appreciate all the questions and comments. I think next steps, we're going to continue engaging with RINCA and kind of finalizing the report and then work through those cost estimating steps that Eric referenced earlier. One thing I wanted to point out, Andrew Byer has sat on our steering committee meetings, so I don't want to give the impression that his department hasn't been engaged or aware of what we've been doing. So just wanted to
I'm
be-
just saying, you weren't selecting your sections of river to enhance the river walk based on, we started doing that years ago is what I meant.
Understood.
I'm wondering if in that summary, will you all have any recommendations on phasing? I mean, that would generally be precipitated by cost, but I don't want to get us in well, I won't be here, but I don't want a position in the future as a taxpayer to have us putting up like the inappropriate sequencing of sections, right? Like if you're gonna do this section, you might as well do these sections too. Is that something that kind of aligns with anything that we'll receive? Otherwise, it's gonna be left to you to figure out that sequencing and. Oh, great. Okay.
I think those are the next steps. Yeah, I think some of the suggestions that they gave at the end are great ones. You know, we can consider if we would want to wrap this into the comprehensive plan as
agree.
like an addendum. I think that's a good suggestion that I frankly hadn't thought about before. And then we'll work towards finalizing that report, publishing it, and then, like we mentioned earlier, probably sometime in first quarter of 25, we would bring this back to Public Works, and they'd start looking at some of those bigger picture capital budget items.
Great.
But I appreciate that, and I guess just to put a button on this, in your packets, I include the 2014 redevelopment resources plan, and I've referenced this before. Sometimes communities will get these plans and they look great and everybody loves it, and it's a pretty picture, and then it sits on a shelf and it kind of gets forgotten. But if you look back at that 2014 plan, the city of Watertown did a really good job of following up on many of the recommendations in that report. And I'm hopeful that with this Rock River District Vision, or whatever we end up calling it, that we'll do the same thing. We're not just going to put this on a shelf and have it collect dust. We're actually, I think, just judging by this room and how many people we have already engaged in this plan, that we're actually going to put words into actions and make something happen. So I feel really good about that.
Awesome.